leadership is so much less about being 100% prepared for it and more about just leaning into the opportunity when it comes. The best teams, the most brilliant, the most talented teams are the ones that have the most amount of diverse voices. I had no preparation for that. I was like just completely caught off guard. It was definitely one of those moments where I had a lot of self-doubt, like, could I actually do this?
Welcome to Make It Ambitious, the podcast for bold thinkers, doers, and leaders who refuse to play it small. I am your host, Big Moser, strategist, creative entrepreneur, and conversation junkie. Each episode, I sit down with industry disruptors, creative founders, and corporate game changers to discuss the strategies, mindsets, and turning points that have shaped their journeys. Whether you're building your personal brand, scaling your business, rewriting your career story, or dreaming up your next big thing, this space is your permission slip to go all in, because playing small was never the plan. You've had an amazing career, and I want everybody to get to know you a little bit. So can you take us back to a time in your career when you realized you just couldn't play small anymore?
The one that comes to mind is a couple years back, probably, like 7 or 8 years ago, when I was pulled in to lead this just huge transformation project for my company. And it was really the first time I had been really involved before in a lot of, leading big initiatives and things like that. But this was like very out there, and it was a very visual leadership role. It was going to impact, every area of the company. We had over 35 work streams. We had people from every area involved, and I really didn't expect that I was going to be kind of tapped to lead it. I had been doing a lot of the prep work with a consulting company, but I thought, at some point it's going to be handed off to somebody else. And up until then, a lot of the leadership that I had done for big initiatives was kind of, in the background. So this was the first time that I had been tapped to kind of have a very visual role in the company. And I remember, we were in a meeting with the C-suite with our consulting partners, and they asked the question, to our CEO, like, who's going to run this? And my boss, our CFO, just kind of said, "Oh, Christy's going to, she's going to take the lead. She's going to be our person." And I had no preparation for that. I was like, just completely caught off guard. And it was like one of those moments where you're like so nervous and so exhilarated, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know that I could do this. Like, what do you mean? And I'm going to have to like speak, and I'm going to have to like talk to all these different people. And so it was just, it was definitely one of those moments where I had a lot of self-doubt in that moment. Like, could I actually do this? And I think what I came away from that with was leadership is so much less about being 100% prepared for it and more about just leaning into the opportunity when it comes and just being open to experimenting and learning along the way, and knowing that you're not going to know everything and you're not going to know everything you don't know, but just being open to kind of learning and exploring it along the way. And I think that experience really, it really stretched me beyond kind of my boundaries, and it really changed my trajectory, I think, in terms of how I think about leadership and opportunities since then.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about what went through your head when you said, I didn't even know this was going to happen, so everything kicked in? What type of thoughts were you having, like, at that moment when that happened?
Like I was like thinking to myself, like, at the moment I was director of FP&A, but again, that was like, a department, not this, I didn't own a business line. I didn't have ownership over all of these like strategic things that I was involved with. I was always just kind of there as a partner. And I thought to myself, I'm like, how am I in my role and how I'm seen? How am I going to bring so many people together? Especially with with a project like that is just so much change at once. And, people are not normally comfortable with change. And so disruption is always, initially viewed in a very negative way. And I'm like, how am I going to get all of these people to look at me and say like, okay, yeah, she can get us through this and get us to the finish line. And it was a lot of that kind of thinking in my head about like, why would they have picked me? If they chose me, it was for a reason. They're seeing something that I'm not seeing, right? And so if they believe in me, if they're willing to put this in my hands, then there must be something there. And I have to just take that opportunity and kind of see where it goes.
For sure. Most of the time, I feel like the imposter syndrome always shows up. They call it that, I feel, in our field when it's very male dominated. It's so incredible to realize that, that it doesn't matter how far you go in your career, those little thoughts still come back
Yeah.
up. But I am glad that you're killing it. So that's all that matters, right? Um,
Thank you.
you said you've made a career out of blending strategy and human connection. Where do you think that ability comes from? And do you think it was shaped more by your upbringing in a multi generational home? Or do you think it got shaped a little bit later?
Um, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it definitely started based on my upbringing. I grew up in a household with a lot of opinions and a lot of, very strong voices and a lot of me kind of having to feel my way around that because in a lot of cases I was the first generation in our household that was not an immigrant to to this country. So I had grown up, been born here. I had grown up here, had more of an American education. And so my way of thinking about things, about life, about the world, about myself and my future was very, very different than the way that I grew up, which was very traditional and much more closed and everything was just it was a very different mindset, right? And so having to constantly try to like navigate that and reconcile kind of like those traditions and that way of thinking with mine and how I was evolving as a human being. I think that really helped once I got to the workforce and I started dealing with folks that were, had very different opinions and about how things needed to be done or how we could do things. And I think I've always been really very strongly of the opinion that the best teams, the most brilliant, the most talented teams are the ones that have the most amount of diverse voices because you need that push and pull, right? You need the people that are going to question and challenge and force you to think differently. And so having been used to that, it was much easier to kind of jump in and say, okay, yeah, here we have like 10 people and we're all thinking about the same thing. But if we can convince ourselves that we all want the same outcome, how do we all kind of row in the same direction together to get there? And negotiating that is definitely something that I've learned much more so as my career has progressed, but definitely started at home.
I definitely think that growing up in a household like that, because I grew up in a household like that myself too, definitely
Oh, yeah.
puts everything into perspective. When you go and everybody has an opinion about something, you're
Mhm.
like, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm used to this. It's just my day to day in my family. And it's so funny how anything that you say or do, somebody has something to say about it,
Oh,
whether
yeah.
it's positive
Exactly.
or negative or anything. It does not matter, but they gotta have an opinion. Before we go deeper, for those new to you,
Mhm.
how would you describe what you do now as a chief transformation officer, and what lights you up about that type of work?
I would say, on the one hand, from my FP&A background, I connect the dots a little bit between like data, people, and strategy. And I kind of bridge that for everyone. When you think about FP&A, we're all about providing, using data to provide insights and to particularly actionable insights, which is very important to me. I want to be able to provide my business partners with information that's going to help them be better, that's going to help them make better decisions. So actionable insights. But at the same time, on the transformation side, then it's about translating that into strategy and making sure that that lives not just on a piece of paper, on some pretty deck that was, presented somewhere, but that it's actually living inside those business lines and that it's actually happening and people are working towards that execution. So I think that's what my role is kind of combining all these different pieces so that we can get to, a place where we're going from that story on a page all the way through executing on this, on this vision that we're seeing.
For those that might not know what FP&A stands for, could you describe that a little bit and
Yeah.
explain what that is?
Yeah, so that's financial planning and analysis. So it's basically putting together all of the numbers that tell the story about what's happening in the company. It involves financial reporting, analytics, budgeting, strategic planning, all of it in a nutshell. It kind of gets wrapped up into that discipline.
So, you mentioned to me before this talk that you're eager to talk about the similarities between parenting and leadership.
Mhm.
So, what's one unexpected way that being a mom has made you a stronger leader or vice versa?
I kind of see parenting and leadership, at least for me, as very intertwined. I think each one kind of makes me better at the other. But I think probably like the most unexpected thing that I experienced as being a mother, and I think it extends into leadership, is that people don't require you to be perfect. What they really require is for you to be present. And that's the same case whether it's with my kids or with my team or with my coworkers. I've kind of learned that, what they want from you is authenticity. They want to know that you are there, that you can be at their level with them, that you understand them, that you can empathize with what they're going through, and that you're giving them your genuine self. And so that's something that I try to model in both, right? In both parenting and leadership. As a leader, you need to always be kind of like present this like best version of yourself at all moments. And I really don't think that that's the way it should be, because I think, your team, just like your kids, they want to know that you're a human being. They want to know that you understand them, that you have gone through the things that they're going through, that it resonates with you, that you can sit there with them and say, "Hey, I've been where you've been and I know how you're feeling and this is how we're going to get through it." And so I think that being present and being genuine and authentic with people, it's something I learned from being a mother, and it extends into like leadership also.
That is such a beautiful way to put leadership. I love it. Thank you for sharing that with me. So, getting to know you, I've learned that you're passionate about mentorship. Can you share a story of a mentor or mentee that taught you something you still carry today?
I've been really lucky, I think, because I've had a lot of good people in my life that have, served that role for me of being these amazing mentors that I've learned so much from. But, I had one individual who I'm still friends with today. She was my first boss at my current company. And I remember when I started, she was, this person that everybody in the company knew. I mean, she literally went by her first name. It was like she was the diva. Everybody knew who she was. And she was this very strong, figure, this working woman, and just, a little bit intimidating. And she ended up, like, over time, we developed such a great relationship. And she has really been one of my most like pivotal mentors. And when I think back on what made her great, and I try to emulate this, like in my own relationships with my mentees, I try to emulate a lot the way she was with me. I think it's the fact that she, aside from always being like objective and very honest with me, she was never afraid to tell me like, "Hey, you need to work on this," or this needs a little bit, have you thought about this a little bit differently? Like, she was never afraid to do that. She never felt like she needed to like, be like, "Oh, you're doing great and everything's perfect." Like, never. She was never like that. But she always believed in me. Always. Like, from the beginning, even in moments that I didn't know that I could, that I should be believing in myself, she believed in me. And she was one of these individuals that never ever try to stamp out my spark. I'm a very curious person and I get bored very easily. And so I'm constantly like challenging myself, and I constantly want to jump into different things and see different things and how can I help and what can I do? And when I started my career with her, I would walk into her office sometimes on a random day and I'd be like, "Listen, I already finished all my work," and I'm kind of sitting there and like, I don't want to just sit there. And I'm like, "What are you doing? Can I help you? Can you teach me what you're looking at now?" And other people that I've worked with and worked for, would see that and they'd be like, "Oh, like, no, 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 this is not your job. Like, go that way." But she was always like, oh, you want to learn about this? Oh, hold on. Let me show you this whole thing. And oh, go talk to this other person and they're going to teach you this other thing. So she always encouraged me. She never told me no. And as I progressed in my career, she would go out of her way to seek out those opportunities for me. And I think that's something that's so instrumental and it has such an effect on people long term. So memorable, right? Like you hold it, you just like keep it close throughout your career and you think about that. And then when you are with other people, you kind of think back on that and you're like, this is what I want to do for others, right? Somebody uplifted me and I want to go and I want to do the same for other people too.
That sounds like a most amazing way to be a leader, really, and to guide someone. I feel like there's always this little sort of like stigma of, wait, she's asking about this because she wants to take my job. And I'm always like,
Right.
no, it's just like, I love it. Like, wait, what is it? Or I'm just curious about it. Tell me more about it. But I feel like a lot of people do that. They hoard their knowledge or they hoard what they're doing because they always feel like it's a competition for some reason. And I've never thought of it that way. You mentioned also about the power of positivity and possibility in your thinking.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you?
I'm a very positive person by nature. That's kind of like my default. I tend to be very almost on the verge of being optimistic sometimes, like overly optimistic, but I have a way that I always try to find like the silver lining in anything. It doesn't matter how grim it seems. My instinct is to first try to see, okay, what good could possibly come out of this, regardless of what it is. And that's just kind of my nature. And because I think that way, I think I also tend to gravitate more towards thinking that anything is really possible. For me, that's really always helped me in terms of like even my professional development and my growth and even at home in my parenting, because I try to reinforce that around the people around me, trying to get them to kind of reframe the way that they think about things in a way and to not kind of drown in the darkness, but kind of find the light every time and focus on that, right? So I think trying to build that resiliency, trying to help others kind of see that too. That's something that I try to strive for a lot with the way that I do things and how I coach people and how I approach parenting and leadership and pretty much like every aspect of my life and my relationships too. Really, I'm like, I want people to feel that it's the focus shouldn't be like that daunting task, that huge mountain that you have to climb. It's all about that journey to get there and how wonderful it's going to be when you do, and celebrating all those little wins along the way, because every single one is just getting you a step closer to that beautiful outcome that you're looking for.
What would you tell to someone who, it's in a dark place right now?
I would tell them to take a step back and to think about what opportunities could come from the situation that they were in, right? And I actually have a similar situation that I'm in with a good friend of mine who's kind of like also in a little bit of a dark place right now. What I try to say, to her is take a step back and think about what it is about what you're doing now, right? That makes it so difficult and so daunting and that has you in this kind of like negative space. And what is it that it would take, right, to get out of it? What is that positive thing that could change everything? And sometimes it's just about the little things and it's about changing those little things in little ways. And all of that stuff kind of builds up and adds up over time. Other times it's going to be about really taking a step back and accepting that this is a bad situation and it's never going to change. And it's not something you can control. And maybe the best outcome is to say, you know what, I'm going to completely remove myself from the situation. It's about taking those individual little steps, which are never easy, right? It's always so much easier to say it than to do it. I am exactly the same way. I get into those same loops too. But I think, you have to focus on the other side and on that positive and what could come from it. And that has to be the guiding light. And I think if you look at that, everything else kind of starts little by little to fall into place. You just can't get consumed by just that negative situation and feel like you're powerless and you have no way out of it. There's always a way out of it.
I feel like we can get dark sometimes. Yeah, when I am in that place, because I can go there a lot. a little bit like I try to be positive, but my default is not like yours. It's not positive. My default is negative immediately. And then I'm like, no, 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 no. Go back. What is going on? It's good to know that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, like they say. Talking about that, like being in hard places, a lot of ambitious people, whoa, wrestle with burnout, boundaries, and like a constant pressure to perform. How have these shown up for you? And what's one mindset shift or habit that has helped you protect your energy and, still deliver at the high level that you are?
I wish I could say that that I had like a great answer, that I was really disciplined about that. I really am not. I'm kind of still on the journey to figure out how to like master that. For me, what's really helped, and I've been very intentional about this year. I think I had a little bit of, almost like not a meltdown, but it got to the point where I was so overwhelmed with everything that I had going on. And I really had to take a step back and say, like, this is just not sustainable. Like something needs to change. I think what's really worked well for me is to set boundaries. And I know that sounds so cliche, these types of boundaries that allow you to choose what it is that you want to spend your energy on. And when you do that, it actually really enables you to be more present, to be more impactful, because then you're not overwhelmed. You're not super stressed out. You're not in this kind of negative space and negative loop. That's really helped me. I think the other part too is kind of reframing how I think about what I take on and about when I say yes and no. Any young person I talk to, like my kids included, I'll be like, every opportunity that comes your way, like say yes, because you don't know what'll come from it. But I think as you get older, you get into that habit. If you are ambitious and you're driven to succeed, you're not going to just wing it. You're going to give it your all. And it gets to the point where you really don't have that much more to give. And that's just not good for you. And it's not good for the outcome that you want either. So that too, like questioning myself and forcing myself to say no to things from the lens of, is this really going to be something that's value add, bring me positive energy, or is it going to completely deplete me? And at the end of the day, it's really not going to contribute all of that much. That's how I'm going to make my decision. I'm going to filter it that way. And it really has helped in a big way.
When you mention boundaries, I feel like we also have to send boundaries with ourselves.
Yes, that's actually a really good point.
For someone feeling stuck in their current role or in an identity that no longer fits them, what's one small but meaningful step that you think they could take towards like seeing real change?
I would say start with curiosity, because I think, just thinking about the things that you have a passion for, that really light you up, that really are, just something that you really just brings you joy and fulfillment, and starting there, and then kind of like taking these little steps to what could you possibly do within that scope, that if failure wasn't even like a notion, you would just jump into it with your whole heart, right? And then take like little steps to that, whether it's, taking an online class about something, or somebody that's kind of doing something similar or was in a similar space, that you can just kind of talk to them and brainstorm and say, hey, how's it going for you? What do you think, with this, how could I do this or that? And just kind of getting that feedback. That's a great way to kind of get that going, and it kind of gets you thinking about what else there could be. Coincidentally, I was on a panel recently, and we were talking to, the audience was about 20 girls. They were all in different careers and in different trajectories within their degree and all of that. And the question that was asked was, when you think about long-term beyond school and you're entering the workforce, what are the things that you can think of or focus on that are going to help you with self-development and that are going to help you with long-term success? And when it came back to me, I kind of said, well, I've grown up in my career kind of thinking about these like 3 core competencies that I think are super foundational to that, right? And I call them the 3 C's because that's kind of how in my head I always remember them. And the first one is always curiosity. And then it's confidence, and then it's courage. And to me, these are kind of like, it's it's a loop because they all kind of reinforce each other, right? You start with curiosity because that's what's going to lead to, to learning and exploring. And then as you gain knowledge and you gain experience, then the confidence builds up. And then courage is what's going to let you act upon everything that you've learned. And then the cycle's going to start again. And so that all kind of reinforces it, but it all starts with that spark of curiosity.
You can have all the other things, but if you don't have the courage to go for it or ask for it or say the thing or anything, what's one personal story from your career that changed how you see ambition now? Has the definition shifted or is it still the same?
It definitely has shifted. I don't know that there is one specific moment that did it for me. When I think about ambition when I was starting out in my career, it was so much of it was really set to these milestones, right? And to kind of hitting these specific hurdles. And, when you got to this particular role and, you got to this compensation level. And then when you had people reporting to you, and then when you had more people, and then when it was multiple teams, and everything was all about these very like specific milestones, almost like a check the box. A couple years ago, when I finally got to this role that I wanted, this title, I was part of the executive team, and like, oh my goodness. And it almost felt like, okay, like I've arrived. I'm part of this, of this like, wow, this group of people that are making decisions and all of that. And I remember at the moment, it was so exciting and exhilarating that I was like, I was finally there. And then like the next day it was like, all right, now what? Like, yeah, it was like it was done, right? It was like, all right,
Yeah.
fine, who cares anymore? Like, okay, what's next? And I think that made me realize that like ambition for me has changed from like hitting these specific things to more of like the journey and what I'm able to accomplish along the way. And kind of like what have I built as I've gone from one place to another, one spot to another? What have I been able to do for people? What kind of impact have I made? Who have I brought up with me? And that's really to me what drives me now. That's the ambition that drives me now.
Once you hit the thing, it's like, yeah, now what?
Yeah,
And it's great because yeah, you feel great in the moment, but it's so fleeting, right?
it
It's
is.
so fleeting and you're always I don't know if this happens to you, but I feel like you're never really truly happy because you get there and then you're you make it higher or
Right.
better or like you're never like, "Oh, I arrived." Like, you're like, "Wait, I made it to a C-suite. Like, I'm here." It's okay to wanna do more things and still stay curious, but no, you're like, "Now what can I do now?" Let's see if
Exactly.
there's something more.
It's also all about being like competitive with yourself, right? Like I'm a very competitive person by nature, but I've never worried about competing with others. It's always been more about being competitive with myself and knowing that, okay, if I got to here, now I can get to this next place. And there's more to learn and there's more to do and more to change. And that is so motivating because I think if I ever got to the point where I felt like that's it, I know everything, I've done everything, then kind of what's the point, right? Life is all
Yeah.
about continuing to evolve and to learn and grow and change.
100%. I feel like we will never know everything ever, no matter
Thank
what.
goodness that we
And
won't.
oh my yeah, can you imagine how boring it would be if you're like,
Yes,
I've done all the things that I've always ever wanted it to do, and I have nothing to strive for anymore. Like, it would be
exactly.
so boring. Like, I don't know how Yoda feels, but I feel like I don't know, man. Like, I
That would be a
I don't
sad
know if I wanna get
existence.
there. It's like,
Yeah.
I know all of the things about everything, like, oh my gosh, no. There's nothing new to discover, nothing new to see, nothing new to do. Before we move to the rapid fire questions, I have one
Mhm.
more question to you.
Yeah.
So, how do you define success now, and how has that definition evolved over time?
I think success now for me it's just not about me anymore. I think when you're,
Mm.
when you're starting out, success is about yourself and it's about what you accomplish as an individual and your performance and your work, how you're seen. And I think the farther up you go and the more you lean into leadership, the more it becomes about everybody else and so much less about you. All the good leaders that I know do not make it all about themselves. it's all about their teams. And if their teams are doing a phenomenal job, they are the first ones to kind of like be giving them the credit. And if the teams are not doing that great, they're taking, the hurt and the blame for it. But it's about making the people making them successful. It's just that's really where it lies. And I think that's how it's changed for me, and it continues to evolve. It's so much more important for me that my group is happy, that my team is thriving, that they're successful, that they're finding better opportunities, whether it's, within our group or outside of it or somewhere else. Like it's that, to me, that's what makes me feel fulfilled. I think if it was just, oh, I did a great job. Okay. But if everybody else is unhappy and they're not thriving, like how successful am I really? It's not, it's about them.
That's a great way to say it because especially when you're at such a high level and you're a leader, right? Like it's like the success of everybody else is what shows what I've guided that like I've been able to guide
Hmm.
happened. And the more successful they are, the more successful I am.
Yeah.
I love it. It's such an unselfish way to see it. Okay, rapid fire
Oh
questions.
boy.
So I just have a couple. No, they're not hard or anything. Just tell me the first thing that comes to mind,
Okay.
or you know, yeah. So what's a mantra or quote you'll come back to when making big decisions?
Never give up.
Ooh, I love that. Never give up. What's one ambition you're chasing right now that feels a little bit scary but exciting?
Trying to envision myself doing something for me, like having a career that's outside of the establishment, but really like setting out to do something on my own.
Ooh, a new entrepreneurship. I
Mhm.
love it. What's something you're proud of that does not live on your LinkedIn?
I, hmm, that's interesting. I mean, at the risk of sounding super cheesy, I'm going to say my kids.
Oh, no, that's not cheesy at all.
They're
No,
like
I
my
love
biggest like
that.
pride and joy.
It sounds like you're doing an amazing job at being a mom. So, yeah, why
I
not be
try.
super proud of that, you know? You mentioned that you're known in your friend group for planning detailed and immersive vacations to the point
Mhm.
where they're like, hey, you should have a travel agency of your own. What's your favorite vacation you've been to?
Iceland,
Oh, wow.
hands
Tell me
down.
more about it.
It is like just one of these places that like I can't even put it into words. Nothing that you read about, nothing that you see in pictures prepares you for when you're there. It is like something that just came out of a fantasy novel, and you're like, how is this place real? It's just incredible. And I've been to a lot of amazing, beautiful places, but that place just blew me away. And just the fact that, you have the ice and the fire, and it's an entire island. There's no trees, but it's so green, and it's just, oh, it's spectacular, spectacular. I hands down my favorite place ever. And I spent so much time researching and putting together like that itinerary and trying to find all these places that were off the beaten path, that where, when we went, we were literally the only people there. I think that made it even more special, because it was like, oh my gosh, how are we like the
Wow.
only people here that are like enjoying this? Like it's incredible.
I love that. At what time did you go so that when I go, I could be the only person there too? Like what time of the year was
Mm,
it?
well, surprisingly, it was in the summer, and but
Oh,
it was all about
okay.
finding these places that most people didn't go. And one of kind of like my tricks of the trade is, I will, when I want to go somewhere, I'll start, researching a lot of, photographers and bloggers that actually are, residents from the country, or they live there. And a lot of them will post a lot, pictures and places, and they're very good about not telling you where they are, because specifically because they want to protect, how special and unique those places are. They don't want it to be a thousand, like tourists like flooding in. But I'll do enough research to try to find where those places are. And I still remember one of the perfect examples. My husband and I, when we got there, I think this was like the second day we were there, and we went to, it was like one of the major waterfalls right outside of Reykjavik, and it was like, Victoria, I mean, it was packed. When I tell you packed with people, like up at the waterfall, up at like the platform, packed below, like all the campers and the tents, and just down the street, and I mean, like maybe 5 minutes down the road, there's this like little hidden trail, and you have to kind of go through this farm and kind of walk your way, and you have this like incredible hidden waterfall. And we were literally the only people there, the only ones. And we were just like, I don't even know, like a couple thousand feet from all these other
All the
people.
people,
Yeah. And
everybody.
nobody knew about this. So it was, yeah, it was, those
Wow.
moments were just, it would just made it epic, honestly.
Oh, I bet. It sounds fabulous. I'm definitely going to adopt that trick for sure. And
Mhm.
I feel like other people might steal it too from this call because, yeah, I never thought to look at photographers and like what places those are. And you're right. If they don't want to say where it was, maybe you can do like a reverse image search or something and figure it out, or even just be nice about it and be like, hi.
Could you like, can you help me out? Do me a
It's nice
solid.
to meet you. I know you don't know me, but I'm coming to your country and I would love to go here. You have a beautiful photo. I love that. That is so
Yeah.
cool. Okay, last one. If
Mhm.
someone listening feels stuck and wants to make a bold move, what's one thing you'll tell them to do today?
I would tell them to put down on paper, in writing, exactly what they would want to do, and take one micro step towards that, no matter how small, but just one micro step to that. So that once they are able to accomplish that, they can feel like, okay, this is really not that daunting. This is not that difficult. I can actually do this.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for coming, Christy. Like,
Thank you
it
so much
was
for having me.
fabulous to have you. And I love your openness and just your warmth. Like, you've been an amazing guest. So I'm really, really glad we did this.
Oh, thank you, Victoria, and thank you for having me. This was amazing. I really appreciate you bringing me and letting me be a part of this.